Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Bulls. On today's episode, I actually do a crossover episode with host had a stroke there, of Locked On Knicks, Alex Wolfe, as we break down tonight's Bulls versus Knicks game, outlook for the future, and where we see this Knicks team and Bulls team going. All that and more in today's episode of Locked On Bulls, and it starts right now.
You are Locked On Bulls, your daily podcast on the Chicago Bulls, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for listening in to Locked On Bulls, member of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm Pat the Designer, and as I said, we're breaking down this Bulls-Knicks game tonight. But first, I have to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Let's get into the interview.
All right, it is crossover time. Locked On Knicks and Locked On Bulls. I am Alex Wolfe of Locked On Knicks. He is Pat, the designer of Locked On Bulls. And this is a nice little, I don't know, it's almost like its own little halftime here, Pat. Like we're in between this sandwiched in the middle of these two Knicks Bulls games. The Knicks took round one. Tonight we'll see who takes round two. I'll try my best not to gloat too much, but I do just want to real quick check and make sure that Alex Caruso is okay, because he died a little bit on the court at the hands of Jalen Brunson.
You want to know
he looked all right after the game, but like I'm not 100% sure. I just want to make sure, like physically and mentally, that he's doing okay right now.
The toughest part about it was I was fully prepared to clip up him crossing over McBride, but Brunson or Caruso, I was like, it's just so much better. I mean, it's just so much of a better get. And so that was a tough one. He went to the bench right after that, sat down. Doctors say his pride is crushed, but he'll be back.
The top medical evaluators have diagnosed him with a bruised ego.
Jeff Tanaka's back.
He's got a contused ego would be the medical term.
I'd be a little worried for you guys coming into this game because that's on what was that? That was 5 on ESPN. You know he's gonna be like, now I've got to kill Brunson.
Yeah.
Now I have to get my revenge.
I will say it's good luck to him. Like Brunson does a pretty darn good job of just kind of doing whatever he wants, no matter who the defender is this year. Which, you know what, that brings us right into trying to like preview this game. So like, this comes back to MSG now, and I think that in theory should give the Knicks an advantage, but they've notoriously the last few years been kind of a mediocre home team. So I can't say for certain that gives them any sort of advantage, but I will just say, like, I really like how the Knicks are playing right now. And I think the whole fan base does. Tibbs tightened up his rotation. They're playing more of their young guys. They're playing great defense. They're playing ball moving, smart offense. I'm kind of just curious, like, how are you feeling just on sort of a meta level about the Bulls right now? Like, and how they're playing, and what's like your confidence level going into the second game of the Bulls' ability to kind of jump back and take the second game off the Knicks?
I think the thing is for me with the Bulls, and I think actually, dog, I think they're in Chicago still. I don't think they went back home. They're still here. They're still in the Chi. So
not bad.
Which is weird. Who's doing the scheduling here?
Like, I just assumed it was a home and home. I've never in my life heard of that. Wow, that's okay.
It is 2-on-2 in Chicago. And the one thing I will say is, right, like, I thought the Bulls and the Knicks both matched up really well. I thought there were some things that definitely went in you guys' favor. But I thought the one thing that stood out to me was the Knicks gave the Bulls way too many opportunities to just fight their way back in that. And really the Bulls' own inability to shoot them or to not shoot themselves in the foot continuously really ate them up, right? Like the one thing I'll say that you guys over on Locked On Knicks probably don't pay attention to is that we've had basically one game this year where we didn't suck in the second quarter. It was versus the Dallas Mavericks, so take that, Nick. But outside of that, right, like you guys saw it, right? The Bulls just couldn't score in the second quarter when you guys were able to go essentially ballistic on us and really build that lead. And the hard part is just the consistency of the Bulls being inconsistent in games that always shows its head again, right? Like I don't expect the one thing I expect to see is the Bulls fight their way back in the second quarter, very much like they did. Julius Randle to give us an opportunity with an interesting right side fadeaway jump shot over Patrick Williams, which is an opportunity for us to fight our way back in that game. And then there to be a deficit at the end of that game where we're just looking, it's like, you're not going to close this one out either. The Bulls are 2-18 or 2-16, I should say, in 18 games this season, in games close under 5 points or less. So I think the tough part here is that we compete very evenly. Are the Bulls going to be able to close this one out? That's the biggest question on the table now.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Wasn't that sort of like, am I crazy, or is that sort of a hallmark of what they did last year? Like, wasn't DeRozan kind of like Mr. Clutch last year? Like, close it and Levine and everything? Like, what's kind of been the story there?
I mean, you think about it, right? And it's just been them actually trying to play together, right? Like when DeRozan was being the Mr. Clutch and stuff like that, Zach really wasn't on the floor as much, right? He was on the floor, I think, for the Wizards and the Indiana game winners, but in both of those instances, right, he was fresh coming back off of injury. He wasn't as impactful in the game. Right now, you're in a situation where they're both trying to coexist at the same time. And it's just a matter of, is it going to work? How are you going to figure out if that's going to work? It's a lot harder to do when you're down to just Ayo Dosunmu and Goran Dragic. Because I'm sorry, not when you're down to Alex Caruso and Goran Dragic due to Ayo's injury. He's probably still not going to play for that game, went down with a pelvic injury. So it's just a matter of like you added back in such a dynamic player, I think, that now while they can play together, there's kind of that clash that's existing.
Yeah, as a Knicks fan, I wouldn't know anything about that with Julius Randle and RJ Barrett previously. Now Brunson added to the mix. It's there was definitely some growing pains for the Knicks, I think, earlier this year too. I will say Randle has done a fairly good job of deferring the sort of alpha responsibilities this year. And he did that pretty early on, but there was definitely sort of this awkward dance of like who takes what shot. Like, honestly, I was very surprised. There was a moment where I really thought that this game was going to swing the Bulls' way, and that was when the Knicks closed regulation the way that they did, with Randle taking somehow 26 seconds off of a 24-second shot clock before, shooting the final shot. And it just was so ugly and just emblematic of like the worst of what the Knicks have to offer in those situations when, I mean, they've drawn up some pretty darn good plays in recent years after timeouts and to close games, dating back to even like RJ Barrett's like game winner last year, shots like that. Like it didn't seem like things were going to go well for them. And, that's one of those things where Brunson has had some opportunities to hit clutch shots this year too. And it's been a mixed bag of if he makes them or not. I did find it a little weird that they didn't go to him in the clutch against the Bulls there, particularly when he was playing quite well. And then of course
do you feel like this is how it looked to me, right? And it was very strange. It felt like that was the first play where Julius Randle was like, no, I'm going to show Patrick Williams that I can make a shot over him. Because it looked like Grimes was coming up to set the screen and he waved him off. So I was like watching the play and I was like, did he just wave off a play that Thibs sent in? Like, is that what we just saw there?
It's entirely possible that that's what happened too. I go back and forth between whether it was like, did Thibs tell Julius, you call it how you want to? Did Thibs draw it up as a Julius ISO? And like other players were just kind of like, okay, let's try to help him create a little bit of space here with this ISO, whatever. Or let me do like a 4-2 pick and roll with Grimes, so then there could be like at least a kick out option for like a pick and pop sort of thing. I don't know like what the overall plan was there. And that's just sort of part of the Julius Randle experience. Like lately it's been mostly good, but there are some nights where he just kind of makes you shake your head. And there are other nights where, and this has been the overwhelming majority lately, where you watch him play and you go, you know what, you've kind of earned the right to do whatever you want here at the end because you've just been killing it this whole game. And that first game against the Bulls sort of was it. I just wish that he would have gone about it in a better way. I don't think he fully understands yet that like the best version of himself isn't necessarily a guy that ISOs and stuff. It's a lot of times a guy that just accepts a good pass and shoots a good spot up jumper or something.
He was cooking. He was cooking. I couldn't even be mad at him. I was like, the Bulls are playing him well. Oh, well, never mind.
Yeah.
Well, I felt good in the second quarter.
Yeah, and I mean Patrick Williams had some moments against him for sure. Like I thought that he played a fairly good game against Julius, like about as good as you can expect right now. But yeah, he was just cooking last night. I mean, he's just cooking in general. He's crazy. Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be intriguing to see how these two teams match up this second time though, because I just think I think that first game showed that they're a pretty good match for one another this year.
Yeah.
I think they have a similar talent level at the particular moment where it's like both of them could potentially top out as like a mid, East playoff seed, like 4, 5, 6 range, or could be struggling for a play-in spot, just depending on how some of the breaks go this year. But maybe we could talk a little bit more about that in just a second when we get back in and ask each other about one thing that we're unsure about that we want some clarification on from the other's team. So we'll do that in just a second.
So I really hope you guys are enjoying this episode, this crossover episode of Locked On Bulls. But I do have to tell you guys about the NHTSA. Here's the thing, right? You're hanging out with some friends, putting a few back, throwing some drinks down, right? And you're thinking of calling for a ride, but nah, you live nearby, you can make it home. It's no big deal. What are the odds you'll get pulled over anyway? Even so, what's the worst that can happen? Insurance goes up, lose your license, lose your job, car, you kill someone. Everyone knows about the risks of drunk driving. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel or while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there now looking for impaired drivers to keep our roads safe. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again, play it safe, plan ahead, get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. I also got to tell you guys about Prize Picks. Here's the thing with Prize Picks, right? It's very, very simple to make 25 times your money. How does it work? You pick 2 to 6 players, and if the players you pick score more or less than the Prize Picks projections, you can win up to 25 times your money on your entry. No competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. This includes NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, men's college basketball, so many sports, right? Everything. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that simple. It's safe. It's fast. It has easy withdrawals. And here's the thing. It's currently operational in over 30 states. All you got to do, download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up to play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100 in Prize Picks, we'll give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up and for instant deposit match up to $100. Now let's get back to the show.
All right, we're back in Knicks Bulls crossover, and Pat, you brought this up to me before we started recording. I thought this was a great idea, so I'm going to throw it to you to do the first one. But you had this idea of if we could ask each other about one thing that we're not sure if it's sustainable or not with the other team, and get the opinion of each other. So I'll throw it to you. What are you curious about as far as the Knicks are concerned right now, even if it's just something that happened in the last game?
So for me, right, like the one thing that I've seen this season is that Jalen Brunson is as advertised. Shout out to Jalen Brunson. I got to watch Jalen Brunson kind of as he was growing up and stuff like that, because he played in Lake County and I grew up in Lake County, so I get to see him kind of at the parks and stuff like that, see him playing in high school. But he's still hitting the same shots, by the way, just in case you were like they worked at the park, they work there as well. But on the flip side of that, right, like I know what Julius Randle is. We know kind of what you guys role players are becoming, right? Like Quickly's been in there. But RJ Barrett, big money guy, very interesting guy, shoots the 3 ball with the confidence of Stephen Curry, but knocks it down at a 30% clip. And that's an upgrade because he went 4 for 7 in that last game, right? Do you feel like that's kind of the key to unlocking RJ Barrett? Because to me, I think if RJ Barrett adds just a little bit more offense to the game, not to say he can't get anything at the bucket or at the mid-range, right? He's turned himself into a way better player than coming out of college I thought he would be. But do you feel like kind of like RJ Barrett getting more consistent from that 3 ball is the thing that unlocks the Knicks for consistency winning this game, winning games moving forward, I should say?
I think for me, coming into the season, I would not have said that the 3-point shooting was that swing skill. I would have said it was his finishing around the rim.
Mm-hmm.
And that said, I think he's actually gotten quite a bit better at that this year. Well, I don't just think so. Like, there are numbers to support it. He's shooting 63. He's shooting 63% at the rim this year on 142 attempts so far, which is a huge uptick for him. I'm not entirely sure where that ranks percentile wise. I didn't pull the clean the glass numbers. I could probably look them up as I continue talking here. But like, going into the season, that was sort of the thing that Gavin and I both had said, like, he's got to work on finishing on the inside. Because he has always shown this weird, like, I don't know if you call it shifty ability. Like he just sort of has the ability, despite not playing a particularly fast or like mega athletic brand of basketball. He just always has this innate ability to get his way to the rim. And last year we saw that paying off, and he was one of the like top 4 or 5 free throw drawers in the entire NBA post All-Star break last year. And we thought that, okay, that's great, but it would be better if you could start finishing some of the ones where you don't get a foul call or whatever too, or the ones where you just don't get fouled at all. And he just wasn't doing it. So that was like a huge like plus thing that we needed him to do this year. And thus far he is doing that. That said, now, the 3-point shooting is becoming sort of a concern again. Shooting 30% is very, I would say, uncharacteristic. I think that he has been uncharacteristically bad from 3 this year. And you have to sort of like average out everything, right? Like he shot so well during the 20 to 21 season, but so many guys did. And it's hard to sort of view that as any sort of indicator of anything, because I think we've seen that it was very fluky for a lot of guys. But even with that considered, like his rookie year, he shot 32% on 3.5 attempts per game. Last year, he shot 34% on actually more attempts than he's taking so far this year. He took 5.8 per game last year and shot 34%. If he's shown us one thing as Knicks fans, it's that he is a notorious slow starter. We were hoping that would maybe be behind him this year, but it came back arguably worse than ever. His early season slump, which is concerning, considering like you noted, he is going into his rookie extension starting next year. So, and he got paid pretty well, not super, like, not so much that it's like a huge worry, but enough where you're like, like basically being invisible for the first month and a half isn't really acceptable anymore.
He got paid more than I was expecting to see next to RJ Barrett's name. I will say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, he got paid, I would say probably about what we were expecting,
Yeah.
give or take. I mean, I thought it was when the deal came out, I was like, I think that's pretty fair, like 30 million. But he is going to be the highest paid player on the team starting next year, barring any sort of trade or new acquisition. Like if they roll with Brunson, Barrett, and Randall, Barrett's going to be the highest paid player out of those three going into next year. So he does really have to start producing more. So yeah, I would not be surprised if that 3-point shooting number comes around to more like 34-35% by the end of the year, which I know is actually a pretty huge jump considering we're a third of the way almost through the season here.
Yeah.
But he almost always finishes the season strong. And I think that's going to come to pass again. I mean, until proven otherwise, that's how he's done it his rookie year, his sophomore year, and his junior year.
Yeah.
So
it's better if you finish. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Take it from a team that started off hot and finished very cold. It's better to have it at the end of the year.
Certainly. And certainly when the Knicks are playing better, I think, than we expected right now, and they're managing to get those sort of results with RJ shooting 30% from three. If he starts shooting more like his career average or something like that, or even higher down the stretch of the season, then I think they're in really, really good shape. I was trying to think of like what my thing that I'm unsure of with the Bulls was for you. And I don't like, is it weird to say that I feel like they're just a pretty figured out team? Like, I don't know.
Not at all.
Not at all. So
that's our biggest concern.
I say this in terms of like they're not figured out in the sense that things are working, but I feel like things are working similar to last year, right? Like, am I off base with that, or is there some new wrinkle this year that has led to? I mean, you alluded to like they started off, they were like the number one seed in the Eastern Conference for like the whole first half of last year, or so. This year, starting off, 5 games under 500 through 27 games now. So what's sort of changed so far this year, or just really what has it been? Is it just that juggling act between Levine and DeRozan, or do you think that there's something to the defense like centered around Vucevic, or like what's your read on the overall situation of like how this team with 3 all-stars is where they're at about a third of the season?
So the Bulls are weird, right? Because they're a team of two halves. Like legitimately, you saw it the other night, right? First quarter, competitive quarter, kind of got off to a slow start, but fight their way back into it. Second quarter, dead. In the third and fourth quarters this season, the Bulls are one of the best defensive teams in the NBA, which is a good time to be one of the best defensive teams in the league, right? And I think you guys. We started to get it going against Randall, started to get it going a little bit more against Brunson, forcing those turnovers in the third and fourth quarters. But sometimes, right, you just put yourself in a hole that it makes it really hard to climb out of. And by the time you get to the end of the game, you're a little bit tired. And I think that's been the thing that's been the most consistent that stood out this year. And the fact that, right, like when you have those 3 all-stars, it's almost like, right, like what the Knicks did, where when you have those 3 all-stars, you know that they're going to get the lion's share of the shots. Except there was this expectation that these young guys were going to take this step. And it's very hard to say, hey, I want to see Patrick Williams take an offensive step. I want to see Al DeSumo take an offensive step when they're getting 6 and 8 shots a game. You know what I mean? Like, so I think that the Bulls are trying to do we have all-stars now, but also we're in somewhat of a trying to transition these young guys up period. And you're doing that all coming off of a season where it didn't end in the greatest fashion. So now you're trying to figure it all out on the fly. And I think that's very, I said this on Locked On NBA yesterday, said this on Locked On Bulls. They remind me a lot of the 2011 Warriors, where Monte was on that team, Steph was on that team, Clay was on that team, and you really wanted to see what you had in Klay Thompson, and you knew that Stephen Curry and Monte Ellis weren't going to get you to the point where you were going to get those big wins, right? Like, I think they finished that season 36 and 46. And it was just because Steph and Monte played the your ball, my ball game all night. And it doesn't work out to you actually winning the game at the end of it. It's an entertaining brand of basketball, but it's not a brand of basketball that leads to winning. And so the biggest thing for the Bulls right now is just getting the offensive scheme right, getting your offensive focus right, and actually having an offensive scheme. And they're the last 4 or 5 games, they've implemented more ball movement. They've implemented more, trying to get open looks and not just taking the shots. But in crunch time, right, you saw it was DeMar DeRozan for the first 2 shots. Zach LaVine pulled a couple of bad threes. Vooch got down low, hit a turnaround floater, and then that was the overtime. You know what I mean? So it's like, what their focal point is. You know what they're trying to go to. And DeMar closes out the game 8 straight, so you want to keep going with the hot hand, but that's not the best thing for the offense at the end of the day.
Yeah, I feel you. And you know what? I think that's a great segue to take us into our third segment, because we're going to talk about these two teams, how we're both feeling about them going forward, and maybe get a couple more questions off to one another. But the point about wanting to play young players more and thinking that might lead to more wins certainly rings true with Knicks fans. So we'll talk about that in just a second in our third segment.
Man, we've got some great conversation going on over here on the show right now. What I do want to do first, though, as we take this quick break, is let you guys know about Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for all your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball and the World Cup. We've got it all there at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. They're the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today and use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, that's where the game starts.
All right, we're back to finish up this crossover. Locked On Knicks, Locked On Bulls. And Pat, you sort of ended the last segment talking about this weird juggling act that the Bulls are going through, and it's very relatable to Knicks fans, right? Because you talk about, you have the 3 all-stars, you have Vooch, you have DeMar, and you have LaVine, and there's this expectation that they're going to be the guys, because of course they would be, because honestly this team has invested a lot in them, whether it's money or draft capital, which, money, they certainly gave a good deal to DeRozan, gave LaVine a big contract, and then with Vooch, traded some pretty solid draft equity for him to bring him in to the Bulls.
Franz Wagner's pretty nice, yes.
Not too bad. Not too bad of a player. So I thought it was interesting, because I feel like in many ways the Knicks and Bulls, and I was telling you this before we started recording, like I feel like they're always sort of intrinsically linked, where they always come up in the same sentence together. And I think it still dates back to the 90s rivalry, Jordan versus the Knicks, which obviously the Bulls came out well on top of that exchange in the overall of things. But, there was that really fierce rivalry throughout the 90s, and that sort of just always led to them being linked to one another. I think the Bulls have had way more success since the 90s than the Knicks have, even if neither team has won a championship since, that point.
How long was Carmelo good there for? About 5 years?
Yeah, but even with Carmelo good, the playoff success was not consistent.
That's true. I mean, ours wasn't either, right? Like we had Derek. Well, I guess we did a little bit better. Okay, I'll give you that.
I mean, yeah, at least made a conference finals, right? I mean, that's more than the Knicks can say. So, at any rate, now I think I find both teams to be at sort of an interesting similarity point, but also difference. And I'm kind of curious what your thought is. Like, I think they've gone about things kind of similar in the sense that they've just been trying to accrue talent. They're not necessarily getting like the A1 guys because there's only so many of them.
Yeah.
But I think both teams have done a pretty decent job of collecting talent one way or another. And they've both, I think, done very well drafting the last few years. Like, I really like Patrick Williams. I think Dosunmu was good too. Like, they both seem really solid. The Knicks, of course, have gotten quickly Toppin, Grimes, Deuce McBride is now, playing a role. So we've got those guys to sort of like root for and look at. And then they have their like all-star big money type guys, which now RJ sort of counts as part of that. We already talked about that with Randall, Brunson, and then obviously on the other side, the three guys on the Bulls. I think the biggest difference is what has been invested in these cores for both teams, where the Knicks have a surplus of like draft assets and stuff going forward, and the Bulls have put themselves at a little bit of a deficit.
Yeah.
What's like your confidence level in this team going forward? And I guess more importantly, what's your confidence level in their ability to get better and do whatever it is they need to do to take that next step? And could it just be as simple as leaning into some of their younger players more?
I think there's a little bit to both sides, right? Because we did trade away the draft capital. So in your mind, right, you're like, well, you don't have that capital moving forward. But the one thing that I'll say with the Bulls is I think that a lot of Bulls fans missed the part where we just had to become respectable again. I feel like the Knicks can honestly speak to that as well, right? Like there's a point where both of our franchises were just looked at as, why would I come there? Like, you're not going to sell me on the city. I don't care that you're in Chicago. I don't care that you're in New York. I want to win, and I don't think that you're a winning franchise. And so you had to become respectable again, right? And I think you guys were a little bit ahead of us, right? What was it, when did you get Randall? 2018 season?
Summer of 2019. That was
2019 season.
The summer that could have been which honestly now I look at it as the summer of the giant missed headache with Kyrie and Durant and all that.
Yeah. So you come away with Randall, right? You've got RJ Barrett there. You end up acquiring Brunson. All of a sudden, right, or just having Randall and Barrett there, I think it made the Knicks more of a respectable franchise and a franchise that you looked at and you were like, well, they're trying to win. They're trying to build a team that is going to put something on the floor. And then once you're respectable again, then you can go also New York, and so the Bulls were so far gone with everything, right? Like we were literally the laughing stock of the NBA. No free agents were coming here. I mean, our big acquisition one offseason was Troy Brown Jr. Like that's what we were working with there. So like you had to make Chicago respectable again. I think that's what you do when you add in Nikola Vucevic. You make that trade, and all of a sudden is Zach LaVine in a top 10 center in the NBA. And then all of a sudden DeMar DeRozan looks at Chicago and he's like, not half bad. I'd rather go to LA, but it's not half bad. Now he shows up, right? And so I think now the Bulls are respectable again. I think the next step is really just, I think there is a piece that a part of it that you have to say, yeah, we've got to go to our younger pieces, especially guys like Ayo, who's playing a very strong role at the point guard position, which I think is the biggest change for you guys, right? Having a point guard that isn't just like Brunson in Dallas seemed more like scoring oriented because he was the only offense on the team. It really seems like he's more, I got to facilitate this basketball. I got to move the ball around and get everybody involved. And so I think that adds to everything that your team needs. And that's the one thing the Bulls are missing right now. Lonzo Ball out, reported he could miss the entire season yet again. Tough signing right there, right? And then, you have P. Will, where he's the biggest question right now. And I think like a lot of teams in this league, right, we're seeing a lot of mediocrity in this league because there was a lot of players that were supposed to take a step this year that just haven't yet. And so I think that's kind of where the Bulls are, right? Like AK bet on continuity. And to be honest with you, right, one of those players is Zach LaVine from a scoring aspect because everybody else has played better. P. Will's been good. Ayo's been good. Dragic is as advertised. Drummond is as advertised. Like all of the pieces on the bench, Javonte Green's playing better. The parts that aren't playing well together right now are Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, and Nikola Vucevic. And when you bet on continuity, those are the pieces that you need to play the best.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I could definitely say, you can have a good passing big man. You can have a guy in DeRozan who I think is, an above average passer for his position. And, LaVine, who like came into the league as sort of a combo guard and then quickly sort of found himself as a shooting guard. But, at least early on in his career was like, oh, maybe this guy could be a point guard. And I don't think that's the case. But, you can have all.
He doesn't have a good enough handle. Zach will dribble it off his knee 8 times a game.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like you can have all this talent, but I got to say, man, like, I think you nailed it. Like the different. So So in 2020 to 21, when the Knicks wound up the 4 seed, which is still still blows my mind that they managed to pull that off that year. They were just going through Randall, but Randall was just playing so out of his mind. Like, I mean, there were some nights where we were like, this guy just played like freaking LeBron James tonight. Like, this is just unbelievable. And, he had such a good year that you could live without having a point guard that year. But last year really exposed, like, okay, if Randall now suddenly comes back down to earth, he is not the guy that can do this for this team. And they definitely need that point guard finally, which they hadn't had in forever. And getting Brunson has just been, I mean, this fan base had to go through so much, like with point guards or lack thereof, just like, I mean, Alexi Shved played minutes for the Knicks at point guard at one point. And, it was a tank season, but I still haven't forgotten about that. Like,
Frank Ntilikina still sticking with you. That okay for you there?
I actually always loved Frank, but I thought that he started slotting in as more of a combo guard towards the end, which I think is what he's proved to be in Dallas now, where he gets minutes. But yeah, I mean, he's been a huge difference for the Knicks, as far as Brunson. That, ultimately, I don't know so much that was just like the bright lights in New York so much as the family connection with Leon Rose and his dad and everything. But whatever reason it was that brought him to the Knicks, obviously getting more opportunity has been great for him. I mean, he's one of the biggest reasons why I feel really good about the team going forward. Like, he's very much just hitting his prime. He's like 25 years old, I think, maybe 26 by now. Randall is in his prime, I think, right now. And whether they stick with him long term or not will be a TBD kind of thing with, Obi Toppin occasionally looks like he could be a potential, really high level starter at Julius's position, but it's really hard to say like, oh, I don't want Julius Randle to be on the team with how fantastic he's been playing lately. RJ in some ways, seems like he's not progressing enough, and yet even with him not playing up to expectations this year, he's still averaging 19 points per game, which is not easy to do in the NBA. So I mean, I really like where the Knicks are going forward. Like, and part of it too comes down to like having that surplus of draft picks and stuff going forward. I think that they're primed to make another move. I think if I was a Bulls fan, one of my biggest hangups would be like, but you know what I mean? What's the next step here? Because it seems like I don't think either of us would sit here and say like, oh, if things stay status quo, this team could win a championship in the next 3-4 years.
And that's been the biggest thing that me and Hayes have talked about, right? Like, I don't feel like this iteration of the Chicago Bulls can win a championship, right? Like, I look at it and I'm like, I would love to see it. I would love for you to prove me wrong. Let's have that Boston Celtics turnaround like last year that every team in the NBA basically is talking about having this year. For any team that was talented last year, it was like, the Boston Celtics did it. It was like, that was like a historic turnaround. Like, that's not normal. They went from one of the worst defenses and offenses to literally the best. But the one thing that I'll say about the Bulls moving forward is just that you're gonna have to make a decision, right? Like, whether it is moving on from a piece, whether it is adding to the pieces that you have that you think are your stars right now, and DeRozan, Zach, and Vooch, right? Adding something else in there, maybe another score or something like that. I feel like the Bulls are very much like that 2011 team, like I mentioned earlier, where like that team just didn't feel like they'd made a decision on what kind of team they wanted to be. Like, it was like they kind of played defense, but they wanted to score the ball a lot, and the rotations were weird on that team. And by the end of it, you were just like, they're fun, but they don't win much.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where the Bulls are. And I think the Bulls also, like, coming out of the gate on fire, like, you knew that was going to hurt our chances of of winning over the fan base if we went through any struggles. I mean, we were 15-3 to start the season or something like that. Like, it was ridiculous. It was crazy out there.
Let me close maybe on this while we're talking about team building and stuff. Just to take your temperature on this, because I'm kind of curious. Like, Knicks fans definitely went through this all summer, certainly, with all the discussions around Donovan Mitchell and all this other stuff, which I feel pretty good about their decision to have not made that deal at this particular moment, even with how well he's playing. Let's just say that like an opportunity arose where the Bulls could trade Pat Will and Dosunmu and whatever draft capital they have left and add a Donovan Mitchell type player where it's like, and let's say like even before like the Donovan Mitchell we're seeing this year that has been playing pretty out of his mind, like let's just say like what we knew about Donovan Mitchell before this year.
Yeah.
If they could add a player like that and trade away, like fully leverage things and be like, let's roll with player X, and let's say it's a point guard of some sort. I don't know who that would be. I don't know. Let's say like Lillard or something became available like that.
Yeah.
If that deal became available and they say basically all the young players, all the draft picks, you get Damian Lillard and he can roll with Levine, Vooch, and DeMar. Do you feel confident enough in that core plus another star that you would be like, yeah, let's do it. Let's ride and see how this goes? Or would you be like, no, I think we should probably not do that?
I don't think. See, here's the thing. I believe that Patrick Williams will become the player that AK thinks he will be. I just don't know if he'll be that player on this team because you're not going to get 15 shots with DeMar, Zach, and Vooch on the team. You're just not. When he gets more, literally, when he gets more than he's like Rudy Gobert. When he gets more than 10 shots, he averages 15 plus points a game. If a deal like that were on the table, the age of the player would come in so imminent, right? You guys get Brunson, he's 26. The trade for Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell's what, 25, 24?
Mm-hmm.
How old is Donovan? Like young, right? Like I think Lillard's age would be the biggest issue for me in that situation over anything else. I think that if you're not, I wouldn't be opposed to making a deal for a big name star like that, but the age of the player would have to come into account for me, right? Like it would have to be maybe I of course they'd never do it, right? But like if SGA was on the table, because I know what his setup ability. You know what I mean? Like just a player that like maybe he's on a bad team and this team looks at P. Will and they're like, yeah, but if we give him those shots, we'll be able to take that next step. Maybe we go talk to the Magic for one of their like 37 point guards and or 42 forwards. Like they feel like they have so many players on their team.
Yeah, I got to tell you, there might be a day when if SGA ever becomes available, the Knicks and Bulls might both have their hat in that ring because
I could take a little SGA action.
Definitely a guy that we have talked about on our show already too, of like, if he ever becomes available, give it all up. Like, who cares? Just give it a shot because he's so young too. I think I'm fully with you there too, though. Like, I think that's kind of where we're falling. Even with Mitchell, it was like, do you really want to give up all these guys and gut the roster and then bank on Mitchell being able to mesh with like Randall and Brunson and like make something, and maybe RJ, if you were able to make that happen and hold on to RJ, like, would that be good enough to win a championship or something? And the answer that we came to is like, probably not. Like,
do you still feel like you're a couple of pieces away?
I think it depends on who the next piece is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think certain guys, it would have to be like I don't know. I feel like SGA maybe would be a guy that if he came in, they would have enough time that it wouldn't be like you're on a 1 or 2 year clock to make it work. Like I feel like that whole ship seems to have largely sailed in the NBA, and like continuity matters so much, and letting these guys kind of grow together for like a couple of years before you make a title run. Like almost every team in the NBA that's won championships lately, short of like the Lakers a couple years back in the bubble, like it feels like they've had teams that have coalesced over a long period of time and that know each other like a book, because that's just the level of execution that you need. So like if you pull a trade and it's not for like the perfect guy that you can keep for a long time with a core that can stay together for a while, like I don't necessarily know if it would work. And granted, Mitchell, maybe that could have worked.
Yeah.
And they could have built the roster out well enough over a couple years and kept that core together, but I don't know. Yeah. Some days I wake up and I think they're only a piece away. Other days I wake up and I'm like, I still think there's a decent amount of work to be done. But the league is just so weird right now that like
It's nuts.
Who knows? The Knicks could freaking go on a run this year and win the championship. You know?
Dog, it's nuts. Like the Warriors are 2-12 on the road. They're 12-2 at home. Like the Bulls can't buy a win in overtime or in any game under 5. The Knicks are on a 5-game win streak. LaMelo's back and they're losing to the Pistons. Like the NBA is weird, bro.
Yeah. What a weird time to be alive, but what a great time to take in a Knicks Bulls game for the second time in a week today. So
it's always a good time for that. Always a good time for that. Hopefully it comes out a little bit more in our favor on this one. I'm just saying.
I disagree.
Big loss.
But anyway, Pat, it's been a pleasure, man. This is our first pod we've done together, but this was great. We should definitely do it again sometime soon.
Oh yeah, we play y'all like who's doing the schedule? We play y'all like tomorrow or today, and then 3 weeks from now or 2 weeks from now or something like that. Like then we don't see you again until March. So see you then.
Does seem to work out that way sometimes. The Knicks always, for whatever reason, end up playing the Magic like a ton really early in the season too. I've never understood that.
Yeah,
I don't get it. But at any rate, Pat, for those that are listening on Locked On Knicks, do you want to let everybody know where to find you and all that good stuff real quick before we sign off?
Follow me. Send all your bing bongs, all your beef, all your hate at Pat the Designer. I do have a standing beef with Detroit and New York, just a general one. It's a respectable one. You know, I respect the competition that we've built up. I think the NBA still respects it as well. So follow me on everything at Pat the Designer. You can follow the show if you really want to hear some Bulls talk. I don't know why you would, but if you want to hear some Bulls talk over here on Locked On Knicks, follow me also over there on Locked On Bulls podcast.
They're very entertaining. So for the Knicks fans, check out Locked On Bulls. It's a great dynamic. You guys put on a really good show. For anyone listening from Locked On Bulls, I don't really tweet too much anymore, but you can check me out at the Alex Wolfe if you want to just yell at me.
I thought your Twitter was fake. I'm not gonna lie to you.
yeah, or just go in our YouTube comments and yell in there. I like reading those more than tweets anymore lately. So check us out there at Locked On Knicks. But thanks so much, Pat, and thanks everybody for listening, whichever side you listen to this from. And let's go Knicks. End podcast.
Bulls Nation. We're done.
All right, cool.